Folks, hello! Welcome to a new batch of Hobby Nightmares. I hope you enjoy them as we start off your week. If you like what I do, please like the video. It means little to you. It is a 1-second thing to do, is click on that like button, but it means a lot to me as it bumps our videos up in the eyes of the YouTube gods and makes sure that new people can find some Hobby Nightmares to listen to whilst they paint, go about the hobby, and generally have a good time in life. So, let's jump in, shall we, with our first Hobby Nightmare of the Week by Junkie. He says, "Hey North, call me Junkie." Hopefully you're not called that because you're actually a junkie. You're maybe plastic. "Greetings from the United States. I've been listening for about a year now and love the nightmares. I have one for you about my experience at a grand tournament that I attended a couple of months ago. Now, this isn't a typical Hobby Nightmare with toxic players or anything like that, but rather a story about the rollercoaster of emotions I experienced in a truly short amount of time. Looking back now, my experience was really funny, and I even told the story to my brother after it happened." Okay. "And he absolutely corpsed laughing. I will say that I'm a really good storyteller in person and can act out things to make things more animated and entertaining. With that said, I don't know how good the story will come across in writing, but I'll give it a shot. Let me start by saying that I am new to 40k, playing since about 9th edition. I immediately took to the competitive/tournament scene. I love playing games competitively, so naturally, I signed up for every regional tournament and grand tournament in my area. Really quickly, let me interrupt with a bit of cringe. I know this is stupid, and I'm sure that you and your listeners will roll your eyes at this point, but I feel like it is relevant to the story. By 40k standards, I'm an alright looking dude." Oh, God, here we go. He even says, "Insert North, having a go at me here." Yeah, yeah, okay. I know. If someone saw me on the street walking around, they more than likely wouldn't give me a second look, but if a gamer girl sees me in a game store, I would be the most attractive guy in there. Got more front than Brighton Pier. What's going on here? Listen to him. Oh, hey. Good Lord. Alright, Studley. Let's calm it down. I'm taking the mick, obviously. I'm not like, oh, you do you, man. Absolutely great. If you're confident enough to say that about yourself in an unironic way, all props to you, dude. Nothing else to say on that one. Well done to you. Carry on, sir. Carry on. "We all know the typical demographic that attends 40k tournaments. Before you bite my head off, it works both ways and we all know it. A girl who collects and plays 40k is immediately a couple of points hotter on the 1 to 10 scale. True. This really is relevant because this story involves a girl in the tournament who fits those specifications." Right, before I go any further, it is true, but it's also kind of a red flag. Okay. I know that's going to sound really odd and really bad, but listen, hear me out. I know loads of girls who play 40k who are perfectly nice people, but like, whenever I've dated one of them, they've always either played games or been, as in the relationship, or been very childlike or very toxic when you peel back the hood and see what's underneath, right? Don't know whether that's just my bad luck, but the good women I've found in the hobby, I can probably not just name on one hand, but name on one finger, so that's me. That's me. I don't know. If somebody says to me, if I was single and somebody said to me, I really love Warhammer, I'd be like, oh, that's great. But then I would be approaching conversation with like okay, I know you're a girl who likes Warhammer, that's great. That's brilliant. You've notched yourself up 1 or 2 ranks on the hotness scale because, you like something that I like. Okay, fair enough. Let's delve into the other parts of your life. Do you have a job? Do you have friends who like you? Are you on things like OnlyFans, or are you very liberated, quote unquote, sexually? What other red flags are here? If there are no other red flags, then 40k becomes not a red flag anymore, and it's a normal thing. But if I'm into a conversation with somebody And she says, "Oh, I'm into 40k. Oh, cool, cool, cool. Oh, yeah, yeah. I like playing games with dudes because, you know, women are so dramatic. And okay, right, move away, move away, move away. You know, so yeah, be very careful. Sorry, girls. Now back to the story. I attended a 40-player grand tournament a couple of months ago. Day 1 went completely as expected. I went 1 and 2, and nothing out of the ordinary happened. However, let's move on to day 2, shall we? Another quick tangent first, though. I suffer from a mild case of IBS, irritable bowel syndrome. Oh, that's a killer. The only way I can describe it for people who don't know is, imagine having a permanent mild stomach ache. Mine particularly flares up in the early mornings, and for this reason, I don't eat breakfast, as the thought of food in the morning makes me feel nauseous. Okay. So the second day of the tournament starts, and everybody is hanging out and talking about 15 to 20 minutes before it starts. Before I carry on, if you've got IBS, mate, are you very prone to anxiety or depression? If you are, IBS is a common side effect. It's normally the thing that people find first. You know, then they go to therapy and the IBS goes away. It's weird, I know, but there you go. Don't know, you've probably gone over that already. I'm you know, disregard what I'm saying if it's not of any use to you. This is when the whirlwind of emotions starts, so get ready. I'm standing around with a couple of buddies talking 40k nonsense as usual. As expected, my stomach starts to act up a bit. Over the next few minutes, it intensifies, and I mean a lot. At this point, we are about 10 minutes before the morning huddle before the tournament starts. This is when the guy who owns the shop calls me over to say hi and to have a chat for a second. There was a girl sitting next to him who wasn't there on day 1. He introduced us, and I told her hi and introduced myself, but didn't really give her a second glance. North, let me tell you, the struggle my stomach was going through at this point was real. The final straw for my stomach was seeing another player eating breakfast at one of the tables. Now, I know that sounds like a completely normal thing to do, but let me tell you about it. This guy, who was on the exceptionally large side, was sitting there eating a fast food double greasy cheeseburger at 9 AM. Dude, my stomach's going, I don't know whether about your... That right there was enough to send me over the edge. Dear me. The second shop owner stood up and called everybody around to explain the day's plans. I was damn near sweating with how bad my stomach was hurting. I needed a bathroom immediately. Not wanting to look ridiculous, I made my way to the back room where the bathroom was, and as slowly and as casually as I could. When the bathroom door was in sight, I almost sprinted to it. I remember sitting there and hearing the muffled sounds of the pre-tournament meeting going on. I'm not sure if you can relate to a situation like this, but it's hilarious and awful at the same time. Yes, I can relate to it, man. Yes, I can. I'm not going to tell you any stories about it, but I can relate to it, yes. I really wanted to get things over with quickly, if you know what I mean, but this was completely out of my hands. I ended up having to sit there for way longer than I should have. By the time I was done and cleaned up, the first round had already started. I gathered myself and walked out of the bathroom as casually as I could, and tried not to look like I just did the thing that I just did. I got my model's case and walked over to my signed table. At this point, my stomach feels much better, and I'm ready to get this tournament started. Crisis averted, and now I have a completely normal rest of the day. Right? Now that emotion number 1 is over, let's move on to the next one. I get to my table, and guess who is standing across from it? That's right, the girl I met earlier. If I had to describe her on the 1 to 10 scale, she would be a normal 6, but a hobby store 9. You know exactly what I'm talking about. I do know what you're talking about, yes. It's called Nerd Hot. It's called Nerd Hot. So, Nerd Hot is basically a girl that would be cute in a bar, you know what I mean, or wherever, but like wouldn't outshine any of the actual really good looking girls in there. But in a hobby store, you know, very good looking. Yeah, I know it sounds awful, but it's true. It's what men talk about, right? It's nerd hot. She's nerd hot, as in for a nerd, she's really hot, right? Keep in mind, this girl had to wait for at least 5 to 10 minutes for an opponent to show up. Then she sees me walk out of the bathroom with a sweaty face. So there's that. Now, one detail about this girl I haven't mentioned is the shirt she was wearing. I really don't want to come off as creepy here, but come on. Her boobs were damn near all the way out. It was so low, you could see the area... you could see the area around the nipples. Okay, so it's adorable. You don't know what that is. It's adorable. Okay, let's move on. Sorry for being so graphic here, but I swear to God, it's true. I've never felt so awkward in my life. This brings me to Skyrim. This is North talking, right? I once installed a body mod. Don't raise your eyebrows at me. I can hear you, right? I installed a body mod for armors and animations, right? I wanted dual-wielding weapons to not look like I was, spazzing out. I wanted good-looking dual-wield weapons, and you needed to download a specific skeleton and body to do that, right? So I did that, and I walk into a tavern, and looking around, and the tavern wench is there. Oh, hooray, tavern wench. And obviously, I'm in first-person mode. I go to talk to her, and I look down, and I just see, like, half of a nipple is, like, above the top of a wench dress. I'm like, okay, I don't care about dual wielding anymore. I've got to uninstall this. I can't be having this, sorry. So I went and uninstalled it. So I know what you mean. I know the kind of dress or top she was wearing, yes. Anyway, I've never felt so awkward in my life. I feel like she knew exactly what she was doing when she decided to wear that, but I still feel wrong for looking. With that said, I spent the next 3 hours of our game talking to her with my eyes looking anywhere but at her. She kept leaning over to move her models across the table, and I'm just standing there trying to act like I'm fascinated by the merchandise on the surrounding walls, when all I want to do is sneak a peek to... I'm going to be honest with you, if this is me, I know this is awful, but like, if this is me, I'm just like, do you know what? You knew what you were doing when you put that on, so yeah, I'm looking. I'm sorry. I'll be that guy. Yeah, I'm looking. If I went to all that effort to dress up something of mine and put it on display, I'd be more offended if you didn't look. If it was me. Do you know what I mean? If I'm walking around in some sort of leotard that shows my ass or my balls or something, and no one's even looking at it, I'm like, wow. I mustn't be packing anything, right? How did I get here? It's Monday. Anyway. This is where I go, this is where I go back to when I mentioned that I am an okay looking guy. I feel like she was being overly flirty during the game and laughing at my least amusing comments. That could totally be in my head, and maybe she is like that, but everybody, but who knows? Let's make one thing clear. I did not let her win, and I never intended to. With that said, I helped her out a ton with scoring secondary missions, and even giving her good advice on what to attack and good model placement. I guess this shows the sort of guy I am, because I would never have helped out a guy opponent that much. But I guess that's just how it goes sometimes. I think she knew what she was doing. I ended up winning the game and moving on. She ended up coming up to me during the 5th round and asking me how my game was going, while standing unnaturally close to me when doing so. To say the least, it was a wild day by 40k standards. Okay, so did you get a phone number? Did you talk to her? What? So there you go, North. That was my most interesting tournament story so far, and I hope you had a chuckle. From the outside looking in, it probably seemed quite unremarkable, but on the inside, with all of the emotions I experienced in such a short amount of time, it was a doozy. A couple of side notes before I let you go. First, start showing photos on your videos again like you used to, and not wanting to show them on one day of the week. Second, even though I'm from the States, I like tea, and I drink it like you guys do across the pond. I enjoy a nice Earl Grey with milk and brown sugar. Will you give me a 10-second tea preparation instruction of how you make yours? Thanks, North. Love you long time, Junkie. Okay, here's the thing. I do a showcase on the weekend, but I've also said I will do them on Hobby Nightmares. It's just, since then, people have just adapted and started doing it on the weekend. So if you give me models to show on your Hobby Nightmares, I'll show them. I've said that before. Yeah, it's just people stopped when I said, oh, do it on weekends. People just did it on weekends. Did you get this girl's number? Like, did you talk to her? Like, what happened? Can't leave me hanging. What happened? I know, like, for some people, this may not seem like a really big deal, right? That, you know, or what, you know. But, like, for a nerd, as this guy is, it is a big deal. Because you're sort of like, oh, wow, like, this... I'm getting interest, or is this interest? That's the worst feeling in the world, right? It's the worst feeling in the world isn't getting no action, it's... You think you're getting action, like, you think someone's looking at you, you think somebody likes you, but you're not sure, because that voice in your head that wants to run you down a lot and break down your self-confidence is telling you that it's not true, right? This person doesn't like you. The amount of interested people that have, like, wandered off because I've not shown any interest back because I was scared is... I swear to God. I swear to God. It's ridiculous. So I get what you're talking about. I get what you're talking about. But let me know how it went. In terms of the tea, number one, Yorkshire tea bag. Okay, Yorkshire tea. Put it in a cup, boil it, right? Then, if you're putting sugar in, then you put it in before you milk. You put it in before you milk. And you're there, you just, you know, you're having a jolly old time. I let it brew for about maybe 45 seconds, a minute, you know? Or longer. If you want to be experimental, you can do longer. You know, it is fine, you can do longer. Take the tea bag out. Do not strain the tea bag against the cup. People do this all the time. They squash the tea bag against the cup to dry it out so it doesn't drip anywhere. No, be a man, clean up any drips. Because what that does, it releases all of the bitterness from the tea into your tea, which you don't want. You want the aroma, you want the strong taste, but you don't want a bitter taste to it, right? So you literally lightly press the tea bag to the side and then pull it out. Let it sit there for another couple of seconds. Get some ice cold milk, a little bit, not a lot, and put it in and then swirl it around with a spoon as you're doing it. Voila. You've now got a perfect cup of tea and you're ready to go, right? Alright. Joe says, hey bro, just recently got into this channel and I've been loving it in the background at work. Not sure if this is a nightmare, but a huge bonehead move on my part. Okay. I got into 40k around the age of 12 or 13 and my brother was 15 or 16 at the time. We went into a games workshop and got a starter kit. I had the Space Marines and my brother got Orcs. I had my army built and painted within a week. My brother just had his built. He was painting over the course of a month and a half and got half of it done. But we were still playing every Saturday on the dinner table. After about the first month, he put the hobby down completely, and at this point, I had nobody to play with and no license to drive to Games Workshop to play with others. The Space Marines just sat in my room, and the Orcs sat in his. Fast forward to me, 24 years old. I lived with roommates who got married, and my fiancée was set to move in after our marriage in about 2 weeks. I started clearing out a bunch of stuff in my room and throwing things away. I stumbled across a little lunchbox and behold, it was the Space Marines and the Orcs. Dusty, broken and chipped of paint, obviously not all of them. It made me sad to look at, but I got over it quickly and accepted the reality that I wasn't going to play anymore. It took me about 30 seconds of staring and contemplating, but I threw them away. Okay, well, I honestly, I can't really blame you for doing that, do you know what I mean? If you're in like a transitional period in life, you know? Fast forward this year, my wife and I have been married for 3 years now. She is an artist and gamer, so every weekend we chill and either play video games or board games together. And throughout the week, she is working on art. We watched a video of announced games, and I saw the new Space Marine 2 game. I got excited at the announcement, and she asked, "What's that, Warhammer 40,000? I told her about it, and how I used to play it, and how I had the miniatures and whatnot, but they're now gone. She said, "Wow, that sounds hecka cool, I want to play that." I was shocked, as I didn't think she would be into it. As when games become less basic, she gets lost. You're just roasting your wife there. Oh. If it's more basic than backgammon, she gets lost. The real part that cuts deep is when she asked me if I had armies in storage and if we can get to them, because she really wants to try it right now. I wish I never threw them away, as the buy-in is above our budget. I guess it's time to start saving and make the buy-in again. Cheers. Dude, don't curse yourself. People do this all the time. And that they will, you know, beat themselves up for things that they could never have had any clue about at the time. You didn't know your wife would be into 40k, you didn't know you'd be into 40k, you just wanted to get rid of those sad memories of not being able to play 40k anymore, not having them around. That's a normal thing to do, so don't worry about it. Don't worry about it, just save what you can when you can, right? Buy from cheaper retailers than Games Workshop, maybe even get 3D printed models. There are ways and means to go about it. In fact, if you're just starting out and she struggles with games like this, I would go and get 3D printed models that are much cheaper. I would, if I were you. Anyway, Mike says, "Good morning, Mr. Exile." No worries. Long time but intermittent listener, work permitting. Well, I call that weakness. That's weakness. No. Intermittent listeners, no casuals. Get on it, son. Get on it. Not sure this qualifies as nightmare, but it doesn't exactly describe a good experience. So here we go. Sorry, need a yawn there. Oh, sorry. Not sure this qualifies as a nightmare, but it doesn't exactly describe a good experience, so here we go. This is a story about some of my first few games of Warhammer the Old World. Ooh, okay. The new one. Okay, I like this. Alrighty. While I am comfortable with the decisions I made in the end and along the way, there is still some slight doubt as to my judgment of the situation, as there was no overt action taken by the protagonist, but a few inklings of red flags. Obviously, this is written from my own perspective. Some incidents may be exacerbated in writing by my own cynicism. As a bit of background to myself, I have been a long-time Warhammer Fantasy player since the start of 6th edition, all the way through to the end of 8th. After a few years hiatus at the end of 8th edition, brought on by the garbage that was Age of Sigmar, I rediscovered a community that continued to play 6th edition with regular events, both competitive and narrative. The 6th edition community is genuinely fantastic, and while bad eggs are few and far between, I have played with a huge variety of people, so it is usually not hard to identify suspect behaviour. Along with many others, I was unsurprisingly excited by the potential that the old world would bring, although I was certainly sceptical that it would be even better than 6th edition, undoubtedly the finest version of the game to ever exist, but that's a conversation for another time. However, I was prepared to give the game a good and proper go and be able to make an informed judgment about the quality of the game when it came out. With this in mind, I was in a regular discussion with other players at my local friendly gaming club, and when the game finally came out, arranged to have several learning games. The way this happened to work out, due to availability etc., was that I ended up playing against most of my games against an individual who was new to the club, having got back into fantasy only when the old world started. Now, without blowing my trumpet too much, I'm a very capable fantasy player. The people I normally play with are varied, some preferring meta-heavy tournament-style play, others more casual narrative-themed games. With that in mind, I will generally tailor my list and play games to be suitable for the situation. For those I know that are less capable at the game, for which there is no shame, as we should all know, I will tone my list and actions down even further to help bring a bit of balance to it. Although, I will never try to lose a game, but I might be extra reckless with my decision making. Okay, so, as I was going to play with somebody new, an unknown quantity, I got in touch to ask him what army he would like to play. I have many armies, so mainly trying to avoid a mirror match here, or something that could blow him out the water. And how much experience in Warhammer Fantasy in general he had. Although there was some back and forth talk, both my questions ultimately went unanswered. Although when he asked what I fancied playing, I did say I wouldn't mind trying lizard men, because who doesn't like dinosaurs? I didn't think anything of this. Not answering my questions was fine. I would just bring what I thought would be a fairly middling bunch of stuff, although it did have a bit of a lean towards big monsters. Well, you're lizard men, and you like dinosaurs, you know? For reference, Big stuff is generally not that good in 6th edition, so I was curious to see how they performed in the old world, and my gut from reading the rules was telling me they would be pretty well balanced. So, the day of the game arrives. I duly turn up to the club and get my models out. My opponent arrives shortly after, and after the usual pleasantries, I jokingly commented that he brought a lot of stuff, several cases worth, to which he responded that he couldn't decide what army to play, so he brought them all. My first thought was that's a bit of a weird thing to do, but having nothing else to go on, took what he said at face value. After I could certainly understand being undecided, I would never go as far as to bring all of my models to a single game, but hey, we're all different. You'd be scared of them all getting wrecked, wouldn't you? At this point, I could tell he was looking at my army, and after some umming and ahhing, decided on what he would use and started getting his models out. Cue my second internal raised eyebrow. Every one of his models was built, but unpainted. From our previous discussions, all the armies he collected throughout 8th edition, now I know painting isn't for everybody. But the only people I know who can go through an entire edition of the game without putting a single piece of paint on are power gamers who are only there in the pursuit of the crunchiest army possible. But again, I still don't know who this guy is, so I know I must try to not get caught up in the prejudice of my own assumptions. After he got his models out, we both go through our units and what they do and are capable of, etc. It doesn't take me long to realise that there is a suspiciously large amount of tools in his army that are very specifically directed towards dealing with big monsters. At this point, there is a gentle tinkling of alarm bells going on in my head. As the game goes on, it just feels like my opponent is passing a suspiciously large number of important and challenging saves, i.e. 5 pluses on small but valuable units, and above average hits and wounds. I am frequently buried in the rulebook. It's a new edition, and I want to be careful. I'm not making assumptions about rules from previous editions, and I just get this sneaky feeling he's waiting for me to start reading in the book before rolling and declaring his saves. I gently try and test this theory, and by the end of the game, I feel like there may be some truth in my suspicions. Eventually the game ends, a draw, and I'm left to reflect at home on what had happened. Dude, this is the worst thing about coming across these cheating assholes in our hobby, right? Because unless they're doing it in such an overt way that they're kind of retarded for even trying, right? You need to finish a game, really. By the time you're ready to make your conclusions and say, yes, this guy is cheating, you basically finished the game. Do you know what I mean? Because you want to be sure. That sucks. Ultimately, I am still suspicious. Each thing in and of itself made me feel a bit weird, and combined were definitely adding up to red flags. However, I was not entirely prepared to write off this new player just yet. People do have slightly odd habits, and I certainly have seen games with wall-to-wall lucky dice, and rolled a few myself from time to time. So I resolved to not yet pass judgment, but see if lightning strikes twice. By the end of the day, I have no problem losing games. At the end of the day, I have no problem losing games, and cheating of all of the reasons there are to lose is never going to get me. As irritating as it might be to play with at the time, I can still use such games to learn the rules of the game. And so it comes to the next week. The same individual asks for a game. For want of anything better to do, and partly wanting to see if I was right all along, I agree. I don't ask what he wants to play, but he does ask me, to which I simply say I'm choosing between Empire and Chaos. This is true, I was undecided, but certainly wouldn't be bringing both. In the end, I go with Empire. This time, I want to see what happens if you take basic men, as many basic men as you can possibly fit into your army. Usually doing stuff like this makes for pretty terrible armies that have no killing power, but who cares? I have so many bodies to die gloriously in service to the Empire. The day of the game arrives. This time, I was supremely unsurprised when my opponent dragged out several cases again. I haven't unpacked my army at this point, but again, I noticed him giving a look at my boxes to see what I had before choosing his army. At this point, I was again unsurprised to find, as we went through our lists, that his army was so thoroughly aligned to killing lots of very basic troops very quickly, and containing virtually nothing that could be remotely hurt by my poor brave lads. This in particular was starting to irritate me. My army was thoroughly mediocre to start with, and I knew this. I basically did it on purpose. With this in mind, it shouldn't have been remotely necessary to bring anything that even appeared specifically designed to fight what I had brought to the table. The rest of the evening went as I expected. I was reading a lot of rules, making sure I got the mechanics right, and lo and behold, the dice rolling on the other side of the board is carefully timed for when I am reading in the book, and, as you may predict, is getting very, very, very hot. When the dust settles in not much time at all, I have been flattened. My opponent lost barely a handful of models, and in my mind, all my suspicions are confirmed, and I resolve that come hell or high water, I will not be playing this gentleman again. And I don't, and I haven't. The end. P.S. It is very noticeable to me, having attended many events in both 6th edition and the Old World, that it is so apparent that the player base of the Old World is noticeably more objectionable. Few would reach the levels of being nightmares, but still don't make for enjoyable experiences. I can't quite understand why this is the case. Ultimately, the games are not that different, so I would think that they would generally attract similar people. It's regrettably why I've made the general decision to stop playing the Old World and continue on with 6th edition instead. Thanks for reading. I've got a synopsis of why I think that is. Okay. I think Warhammer the 6th edition was abandoned by Games Workshop, and so the only guys left were the guys who were really dedicated to the game, and cheaters are not really dedicated to the game. Bad players, bad faith players who make crunchy armies like this are not really dedicated to the game. This is why, in general, the Horus Heresy players, or the Horus Heresy player base, and Warhammer 6th edition player base tend to not have many hobby nightmares. Don't know whether you've noticed that. It's always the more popular games that have the most nightmares. One, because, they're more popular, so more people are playing them, hence more nightmares. But number two, it attracts the more casual players. And more casual players, I'm sorry, they tend to cheat more. They just do. They just do. Competitive players, they can cheat, and they can fix the rules or try and do mean-spirited things. I mean, we've all seen it happen, I'm sure. But at the same time, you are much more likely to get caught out by your opponent, especially in a tournament or something like that. Again, we've seen it happen. People have even been caught, right? But when they're caught, their hobby career is over. So the risks aren't really worth it. Casual games, though, people cheat quite a lot, especially games where there's tons of players to be found. What you can't do in Warhammer 6th edition and in Horus Heresy is cheat. Because you can do, of course you can do, but you won't get a second game with anybody. Because it's a close-knit community and people talk. Which is why I think you get more better games in Warhammer 6th edition than you will in the Old World, because the Old World is pulling in a lot of casuals who are just starting out, and a lot of people from other games that Games Workshop produce who are entering into the game in bad faith. It's not as much of a... It's not gatekept. It's not gate-kept at all. Horus Heresy is. Warhammer 6th edition is. And I mean gate-kept in the best way possible. If you're found to be a player who's playing in bad faith, or doesn't put any effort into the hobby at all, like your models or learning the rules, you'll be gate-kept out, and nobody will want to play you. Which is why you get generally better games in those hobby spaces. That's my opinion anyway. Anyway, I love you all a long time. I'll be back tomorrow with a big old hobby rant about Games Workshop suing their own customer base. But I may not be as ranty as you think I am, because I've done a bit of research over the weekend. I've come to some surprising conclusions. So I'll speak to you then. Have a good one, and I'll see you then. Bye now.